Hi, so here we are today in Muriani sleigh track. You can see the sleigh track behind me that's going through this pine tree forest and going up the hill. And today our task is to do a LiDAR scan with the drone to cover this whole area, including the hill, the trees, as well as capture all of these parts of this historic sleigh track. And for that we have pre-planned all of our missions inside of UgCS. Next to me, I have the DJI M350 along with the L2 LiDAR system. And now, since all the flights have already been pre-planned back in the office, all we have to do now is turn the drone on, turn the controller on, and get flying. Before heading out into the field, we need to plan our mission. And we're going to do that using UgCS, which integrates perfectly with LiDAR. So now, here we are already inside of UgCS. And I'm now going to try to take you a bit through the basics of flight planning, specifically for LiDAR, and try to explain which parameters I am changing and why. So then to get started, we can click here on the plus button and let's create a new route from scratch. Here as the route name, I will enter L2 scan, but you can choose any name that you like. And for the drone, I'm going to choose the DJI M350 RTK. Now let's click on next. And so now in this screen, we are prompted to choose what type of mission are we going to be flying. And so we're going to click here on LiDAR. And then since this is going to be an area, we're going to choose LiDAR area. So I'll add a few points here. So you can either double click or hold the shift button and click. I prefer to hold down the shift button and simply add my points like that. Then you can hit enter to complete the area. Here on this window, we can simply click on OK. And then if needed, you can still adjust the area. You can take any of the points, drag them out a bit, and so on. But now this area looks good to me, so I'm gonna leave the boundary points currently as they are. And then additionally, what I usually like to do is I like to add also points before and after the area. This isn't mandatory, but it's just something I prefer to do, especially when you're flying over a more mountainous or even a more slightly hilly area. Just ensure that the elevation and the altitude throughout the route will be correct. So now we can click here on add first waypoint. I will add the very first waypoint over here, and then I'll select again the area, and then after it I will add another waypoint. So this will simply also make it a bit more easier, meaning that the drone will automatically start from the very beginning where it will take off. It will then fly and scan the whole area, and then it will return back to the launching point. Now, let's select the LiDAR area, and I'll kind of try to talk you through a bit some of the parameters that I am setting here. So firstly, the field of view angle, so this will remain at 70 degrees since this is the field of view angle of the L2 LiDAR sensor. The flight height, I'll be using 60 meters. This usually you change based on the height of the trees in this area, but since we know this area is quite heavily vegetated, trees might be quite tall, so I will use 60 meters. And then later on when you are in the field, if you want, you can adjust this value. So the flight speed I will set a bit lower since we will be flying above a very densely vegetated area. So in order to get a more dense point cloud as the result, the slower we go, the better. And since now this area it's not very large, then actually with one battery we will be able to very easily cover it. So that's why I'm setting this a bit lower. So next, the side overlap I'll leave at 70%, forward overlap I will leave at 80%. For the camera, you can see I have the DJI Zenmuse L2 LiDAR selected. If you're using the L1 or any other camera, you can select that. If you're using some third-party LiDAR sensor, then in fact you don't even need to select the camera here. You can simply input the field of view angle. But now I'll just again make sure the camera is selected here. Next, the corner radius I'll leave as it is. Loop turns we don't need now. And also make sure that you have the IMU calibration checked here. So now with UgCS 5.14, what's new is that now we are adding the LiDAR calibration segments at the beginning and the end for the DJI L1 and L2 LiDAR flight plans. So this means that the calibrations will be exactly the same, how you're used to in DJI Pilot 2. So the same calibrations will be added in UgCS, meaning that the LiDAR will calibrate both at the beginning and the end of each flight automatically. So now once we have this flight plan done, we can also go here and we can check the elevation profile. So here you can see that roughly the total estimated flight time of this flight will be around 18.5 minutes. It will be 4.5 kilometers, and you can also see the rough estimate of the route altitude range. So I will now already enter for both waypoints. I'll make sure they are at 60 meter altitude. And now once we open up the elevation profile, we can see that so the route altitude range is from 48 to 63 meters. So now here, to basically summarize, you can see we have 2 waypoints, one at the beginning and one at the end, and we have our LiDAR area. Now with the IMU calibration segments for the L2 LiDAR, both at the beginning and the end as well. Now we can go ahead and click here on the elevation profile. This will bring up the elevation profile window in which we can now see fully the terrain. And actually, in terms of flight planning, that's it. So this is just a very basic example of what UgCS allows you to do. Of course, you can automate these flights. You can import them from KML files, CSV files, but this is just the very basics of what you can get done. And moreover, if you have a UgCS cloud account, which I do recommend you get, then it's possible to very easily synchronize this flight from the computer to the DJI remote controller, meaning that you won't really have to mess around with making sure that both devices are on the same network, all the synchronization and so on. It will just be available automatically. Here you can see this is the already processed data inside of DJI Terra. So we configured the L2 with 5 returns and non-repetitive scanning mode. This was very important specifically because we were flying over a forested area. So in order to better capture the ground detail, those were the best settings. So basically, the more returns you have in those situations, the better. And having this non-repetitive scanning pattern also really helps because it does allow to bring out all this additional detail that is below the tree line that you might not typically get. So firstly, for the point cloud effective distance range, we use the standard 3 meters to 300 meters with optimized accuracy and smoothing turned on. For the point cloud, so the density I set to 5 centimeters. And then also I checked separately this ground point classification. Ground type I selected as a gentle slope because there is some slope to it, as you can see, and we'll check this in just a moment. Iteration angle was set to 6 and iteration distance to 0.5. So all of these settings you can see over here. I didn't yet create this elevation model or mesh, but so you can already see what results we get from this. We can also switch from RGB to intensity, height, return, and also this, by the way, allows you to see how many returns exactly were used. And of course, you can see that you always get the first return from the very top, and then when you need to get the data from the ground level, so this will usually be one of the return number 3, 4, or 5. Okay, so now what we can do is we can actually filter out this point cloud. So for example, if we only wanted to see the ground points, we can leave this checked and we can uncheck those unclassified points. And so now we can actually see, so this is how the ground level looks like, which is also quite interesting, I would say. And now after this, basically the next steps would be to process this data in a bit more detail. So you can use software such as LiDAR 360 or Cloud Compare or whatever software that allows you to actually classify more points. For example, it's possible to also calculate the amount of trees in this data set and also extract all of this data. Also here, if you wanted to see the profile at some point, then what we can do is we can, for example, draw a line like so. We can draw it across this area, and then so here this is where you can see the exact profile, and you can also adjust the width of it. For example, we can change this to 10 meters. And now if we also enable this to show all the points, not only from the ground, but also all the trees and everything that the sensor saw, then also in fact here you can see some parts of this sleigh track. And if you wanted to, you could also even measure the distance from the top of the tree to the ground. So for example, here you can see that this particular tree is around 40.6 meters tall. The workflow I showed you is applicable not only for the DJI M350 and M300 drones, but also for the newly released DJI M400 drone. And in fact, even if you're using a non-DJI drone, such as one made by Inspired Flight or FreeFly or some other manufacturer, all these can also actually be used with UgCS. UgCS allows you to plan your flights from the PC, it installs locally and can even run without internet connection. It gives you ability to plan all of your missions in full 3D and have full control over your projects, allowing you to do a bit more complex projects than what you would normally be able to do with simple 2D flight planners. So if you're interested in learning more, visit our website, try UgCS open or free version, see how you like it, and make sure to follow for more and stay tuned for more content. Thank you and see you in the next one.